Hello, everybody. Let's have a mystical conversation, the kind where we lose ourselves in the wonders of divine mysteries. We share dreams from the other side, intuitive nudgings, and soul mission yearnings. A mystical conversation is when we lift above the human mind and we look at our lives from the soul's higher self, the place of divine inspiration, which is where we get our healing and our wisdom and our ability to move through the earth life with light and love. Hello, I'm Sue Frederick. I'm your host. I'm the author of 11 books, including the Angel Up series and I See Your Dream Job and Sacred Numerology. And I'm an ordained Unity minister and a master numerologist. My website is SueFrederick.com. But I am so excited to introduce you to our guest today. I have been a longtime fan of hers, and her name is Susanne Wilson. She is also known as the Carefree Medium, and she lives in Carefree, Arizona, which is so cool. It's just north of where I live. And when Gene and I first moved here to Arizona, we were driving up in Carefree going, "Oh my gosh, I'd love to live in Carefree." And you're there. It's so wonderful. So you are, Suzanne, an intuition educator, a spiritual teacher, and a medium with abilities that have undergone scientific study and validation. From childhood, Suzanne engaged with benevolent spirits through her innate clairvoyance and clairaudience, and she honed her skills while she was an adult in order to keep her conventional career in the corporate world, where she was very successful until she had a near-death experience, and that profoundly altered her life's direction. But she also, just to show how powerful she is in the ordinary world, she was a university director, a Fortune 100 human resource manager, and an entrepreneur with a master's degree in public administration, a bachelor's in management, and professional certifications from Stanford. And she's also studied mediumship at the renowned Arthur Findlay College in England. She teaches Reiki energy healing. She's a certified hypnotherapist and the author of the best-selling book Soul Smart: What the Dead Teach Us About Spirit Communication. I am so happy to finally have you here with me, beautiful Suzanne. It is such a pleasure. And
Sue, it is a delight to be here with you. I'm glad the stars finally aligned. We've wanted to do this for a while, and I think this is going to be an illuminating conversation. In fact, oh, it will be.
well, I want to start with your grandfather because I know that he was very influential when you were young, and that's really where the story begins. So why don't you start there?
I don't get asked about him often enough, and yet this is really how I am, who I am. I was having a really difficult time as a young child. Can remember going to Head Start, and that was for very low income children so that they could get a head start on going to kindergarten and first grade and get a free meal. And I noticed that I couldn't turn off seeing lights and colors around the children and the teachers. And so from that time through kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, I was struggling being the odd kid that nobody for the teams or nobody wanted to be with because, frankly, Sue, I couldn't keep my mouth shut
Yeah.
about what I saw. And sometimes they startled me. And so I started faking like I was sick. I can even remember doing things to the thermometer to make it look like I had a fever. And the first time I've ever admitted that, although I think now Mama knows about that, I did not want to go to school. And
Yeah.
although I loved learning, and so Mom finally sat me down with her dad because nobody was getting through to me about why are you faking sick? And so I finally confided. And he, to my surprise, told me that he sees things like that too. And the kicker is he's a Presbyterian preacher at the biggest church in our little town.
Wow.
And so that began a series of us hanging out in a different way. I was like granddad's little shadow, and I would, he'd pick me up after school on Friday afternoon, and I'd spend the weekend at the manse with Granny and Granddad. We would go to the movies. There was only one movie theater in our little town, and we especially liked Vincent Price and
Yes.
the spooky stuff like that. And we'd talk about it later. These bad things are not real to us because they don't interact with us. And we talk about American history, poetry, and all kinds of things all the way through grade school. But the main thing that I got from him was first off, discernment, discerning the spirits, the information coming in, and also discerning when I was safe
Yeah.
to talk to people about
Right.
it. And that this is a gift, it is a gift from God, that everybody has gifts. He and I are not special more than other people. It's equal
I
under.
love this story because you and I have talked about before that you're on the Virgo 8 path in numerology, which means you came in very powerful and you came in to own your power and you were losing your power, giving it away because you were different and people were bullying you. And Grandpa steps in and he goes, "No, dear. You're very powerful, and everything you're experiencing is true. So let me show you how to own it." What a profound spiritual
Yes.
teacher.
Yes, he's saying you're not unwanted, you're misunderstood.
Right.
And because other people don't see what I see, they're going to marginalize me
Mhm.
so that they feel safer.
And now, all these years later, you teach other people to own their spiritual power and their spiritual gifts and to not be marginalized by society for their intuition.
That's it. That's really it. All the conversations that he and I had, all the things we did, whether we were out fishing or whether we were working on a house, because what he did with his salary when he wasn't giving money to charity, he would buy a house and fix it up because the preacher gets the manse. That's the house that they live in while he's the preacher. It's right across the street from the church. So
Mhm.
he's always handy. And this man worked 24/7, but whenever he got a few free hours, we'd be fishing or he would be fixing up a house and flipping it. And I can remember being at one of the houses, and at the moment there was nothing for me to do. So I had my comic books and was sitting on the floor in this empty house. And he's painting a wall. And on the opposite wall, all of a sudden, a window that was open closed suddenly. And he put his paintbrush down and walked over and opened it. And then it opened higher on its own, as if to say, I
I,
didn't just close accidentally. I'm moving to say hello. And I remember at the moment, he and I just looked at each other and we just smiled. And he went back to painting, and I went back to my comic books.
I love
Looking
that.
back on this tells me I got used to this being a normal life, this
Yes.
being connecting with the unseen world. And that was very helpful.
A question that comes up for me is, perhaps your grandfather was also the first person to sort of teach you a spiritual way of looking at the world. Did he teach you an understanding of God, or how did your spiritual perspective evolve?
Really, by seeing the unseen world and around him is what was really helpful. He pretty much insisted that I go to the nursing homes with him, that I could go if I wanted to the funerals that he presided over, and I did. And I did it so I could see the person who passed. I could see them at their funeral and know that they were okay. Sometimes they would wave at me. In the nursing homes, what he showed me was that the family and God were waiting on the person to
Mm.
pass. And so that gave me the perspective of we never really get away from ourselves. We're always going to exist. And he used to say this, heaven is my home, but I'm not homesick. I have work to do. And he also said, we live so far below our privileges as children of God. And so many of my relatives remember him saying those things so many times. I think of them all of the time.
Mhm.
Therefore, what I learned was accept everybody where they are. It doesn't mean you have to accept their abuse. It doesn't mean you have to condone what they do, but just realize that is their path
Mhm.
and then illuminate your own space. If you model a certain way, people can see that and feel empowered themselves.
Mhm.
And he did talk about Jesus a lot and a personal relationship. He did it in a way that was not Christian nationalism ever. It wouldn't even come close to that. He did it in a way of we should wash the feet of the
Mm.
homeless people. We should make sure
Beautiful.
that they have food and shelter and not judge them. So I would
Mhm.
say this was a teaching of the ultimate compassion.
Right. The ultimate spiritual truth. Yeah.
That's it.
And I'd like to share my grandfather was also very influential in my childhood and my upbringing. And the greatest gift he ever gave me was he was always talking to me about God, but he didn't follow conventional ideas of religion. And one night we were looking up at the nighttime sky, and he put his hand up in the moonlight. And he said, "Do you see that light, Sue?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "That is perpetual light. That is what God is." My grandfather. I mean, I still look back on that and I realize, oh my gosh, I was so blessed because I was also growing up Catholic, where I was learning a very different understanding of God. And what my grandfather taught me guided my whole spiritual truth journey as yours guided you. So we're sort of sisters in that.
It's nice to have someone in your family that is not, if possible, is not the direct um,
Yeah.
disciplinarian, not the direct guardian.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that you can't be close to mom or dad, but to get that perspective of them not seeing your day-to-day life and being able to understand you without that benefit is to tell you they know you as a soul.
Hmm.
He's
Well,
not
and
observing every single thing that's happening to me, but when I finally would get to him on Friday night, he could look at me and go, "You've had some interesting dreams this week.
yeah.
Want to talk about them?" I'm like,
That's so good. That's so good. Well, because you're an eight path, meaning you're here to own your power, I am not surprised to hear that when you went off to college or whatever, turned 18, you decided, okay, I've got to learn how to play the power game with money and career and corporations and all of that. And so, what was guiding your choice to go into business?
I really thought that if I just get control, department or an organization or whatever it is, someone just give me a steer that everything would be right. I love policy, policy wonk for sure. And I just knew I could succeed. And I also was a little on the competitive side. Okay, I'm going to say
Yeah.
a little, and a voracious learner. Not very with people who to me, uh, leaps of light
Hmm.
over their head could see to get to Z for pretty quick and probably mentor, coach, or any of that. But I was very interested in servant leadership, how to serve by being a leader. So I studied all of it, particularly looking at a
Hmm.
number of years.
I love it that you are drawn to learn about leadership because, it's like your grandfather helped you understand power in a way that your soul came to learn about. And then it was handed to you as you got older. Well, if you really want to have good power in the world, you have to be a leader. And so you were drawn to learn how to do that correctly, which is so brilliant. And then you became very successful in that world. How did you feel when you were doing all that work? Did you feel there was a part of you that you had hidden that you were kind of wanting to get back to, or had you sort of put that away, your spiritual side?
Great question. People talk a lot about imposter syndrome. I had the opposite. I had the I can do it syndrome. However, I felt like I had shame around the abilities that I had that other people didn't exhibit. And so it was a secret for a very long time that I was going to workshops, that I was eventually sitting in a mediumship development circle. These were top secret. We don't talk about this stuff in my university setting. We didn't talk about it in my corporate headquarters setting. This is very secret. I got to the point where on the weekends, I had a friend who was a massage therapist who had an empty room open up a room for me, and we called it Psychic Suzanne appointments. Nobody was allowed to know my last name, which, I've never understood. I don't even understand why I was so ashamed. But looking back, I had to go through that. And she would just book appointments for me, and I would sit down, only know the person's first name, and sit and do readings. I was going to my development circle, and I was never going to let anybody find out because I fought for everything that I had. I got my degrees working full time and going to school. I saw other people who I resented at the time because they were handed school without having to work. And so that resentment, I think, motivated me to get the good grades, to be the teacher's pet. Professors all knew my stuff was going to be turned in on time and perfect, and I was going to argue if it was an A minus or a B plus. It's like all this stuff, and I'm doing it a little later than most people. I got my bachelor's at 27 and my master's at 33. Now, people go back in their 60s and 70s and do this. I felt like I was an old student in my 20s and 30s. But the bottom line is, I just wanted to achieve. I wanted promotions, I wanted stuff, and I got it. And
And
it
then you had your NDE.
Well, it wasn't filling me up, Sue. It was something needed to break loose,
Right.
needed to happen. I used to actually almost take glee in firing people that weren't performing as opposed to trying to figure out what's happening in their lives.
Right.
What's do they, I would just say, here's the number for the employee assistance program, fix it. You've got a month or whatever. Not nice.
Yeah.
And that is so incongruous with going to develop.
Right.
But anyway, I'm glad I had all the experience I had because it's made me a well-rounded person. I can talk with many, many people, and I have many corporate clients that are making decisions and looking at strategy, and I speak their language. But I just wasn't an especially nice person. I was more like,
Let's reframe that. Let's just say you were learning the lesson of your eight path journey of what it feels like to sometimes abuse your power and then sometimes give it away so that you could come to the center of the lesson, which is empowerment for self and all. Well done, Suzanne. You couldn't have done it without feeling both sides of the journey.
and that's really helpful. I want people to hear that because I know there are, as you call it, eight paths, which sounds like I definitely was that, and you've done the numbers that don't change, that don't course correct. And after they've gotten their requisite experience and synthesized that and made that into knowledge, the near-death experience had to happen to get me to pay attention to who I was.
So tell us about it.
I had anaphylaxis And anyone who's had an allergic reaction and knows how bad like itching can be, multiply that by 1,000. I was at the doctor's office having allergy tests because I was having recurrent sinus infections. And on this, the second visit, they increased the amount of the allergen that they were sticking into my arm. And I got very, very warm and nauseated. And at first, the technician thought she needed to boost the air conditioning, and that wasn't enough as my throat began honking like a goose. And then there were two technicians in the room and two physicians, and everything really slowed down, way down. And I popped out of my body, and I could see in slow motion, the doctor preparing an injection, one of them, the other one was telling the two techs to hold me up. Apparently, I learned later you don't want to lie somebody to lie down because that increases the risk of the heart stopping. Well, my heart stopped anyway.
Right.
I remember the last breath I took, I had gotten out the words "help me" while they're helping me, of course.
Mhm.
And then I felt when my heart stopped, it was like hitting the brakes on a car. It was like that feel. And then I was like, well, I don't have to breathe now. And there was a noise, there was a pop, like opening champagne.
Mhm.
And I'm out behind my physical body, standing maybe a ways off the ground and looking at the back of my head, having the presence of mind to look at my hair and thinking, I need to fluff it here.
That's so great.
It's just such a weird, random thought, but that's what you do because
Right.
it's like a shock. It's a feeling of shock. And I did meet up with my granddad in that minute. I knew he had his arms around me, like, but I didn't see him at that time. The main thing that I realized from this with the colors and the lights is it was like I was at the airport and I was gonna, metaphorically speaking, and I was gonna fly somewhere good, but the plane never got liftoff because I'm in a doctor's office.
Right. Well,
But
you were meant to stay with us, or that wouldn't have happened in the doctor's
oh,
office.
for sure. In fact, in the ambulance, when they came in, they had the defib machine.
Mm-hmm.
And when they got to me, the doctor said, no, she's breathing. And my heartbeat had come back, and it was really, I don't even want to talk about what that felt like right now. But in the ambulance, what was interesting was I'm lying flat and I'm looking straight up, and now I can see my granddad's there, and he's going to go to the hospital with me.
Oh,
And that's
wow.
awesome. And he looked good.
That's so
And
great.
you just said, if I were supposed to leave the earth then, it wouldn't happen in a doctor's office.
Right.
The EMT was going through my wallet and found my insurance card. And he said, wow, to have this happen to you in a doctor's office, he said, that is amazing. We just the other day had a woman get stung by a bee in the park and she didn't make it.
Wow.
And he said to me, you should play the lottery. And I remember thinking, I've just won something better
Right.
than the lottery. I am so open. I feel so different. It really was a change in me right there.
But then did you just go back to work and try to life as usual, or how did you become the carefree medium?
They didn't let me come back for a little bit. I wanted to the very next day. In fact, I actually no, I'm remembering I did go back, even though they said you're out for a couple days. I did go back later in the day. I wanted to hug everybody, and that just it was just not me,
Right.
and it's not appropriate.
Right.
And I didn't want to do that job anymore. So I started not doing a very good job. And I also went into a depression for a while. I didn't get any help for it. My help was to drink, which I hardly ever do now, even though I'm a certified specialist of wine. So when I say I know about wine and spirits, there's that double meaning. But
Yeah.
I did drink a lot for a while because I felt like I got rejected from heaven.
Right.
One thing that I'll tell you now, the reason I felt that way is because right before I got the injection that sucked me back into the body like a vacuum,
Mhm.
I heard this really odd voice say, "Your work has not started."
Oh, wow. That is so good.
And Sue, I didn't think about it for a couple of weeks. And
Hmm.
then I flashed on that like, that wasn't Granddad. I don't know who that was.
Right.
It was like, it was very flat and it sounded like it was like, uh, hard to describe, like robotic.
Yeah. Like from a different realm, a different reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
your work has not started. Yeah. That sort of thing. And I was super resentful. I'm thinking, what do you mean? I'm working on a PhD program. I'm working more than full time. I have no life. All I do is work. And,
Right.
so you have to, when anybody has of an epiphany, a life-changing experience, it doesn't have to be a near-death experience. You got to process that stuff.
Right.
You
Right.
can't just, I said a minute ago that I changed instantly. Yeah, but into what? For a while, I'm confused. I'm disappointed. I'm blaming myself that obviously I'm not doing the right things here. And it takes time to get that perspective that you've got to, from your own 3D human viewpoint, synthesize that whole experience. And you need a lot of self-reflection time after a wake-up call. And I did it in a real sloppy way, but it worked.
Hey, you did it the way your soul needed to do it, you know? Let's look at it from our soul lens. Our souls are just sitting here going, "Well done, Suzanne. You have learned the journey of the eight, the
Yes.
power you came to learn. Well done."
Yeah, well done, drunk. You know, it was like every night, 3 or 4 glasses of wine. I didn't drink in the day, but I would drink all afternoon and
But you
all.
know, one thing I believe about addiction is that very sensitive souls who have a memory of heaven or have been there through an NDE or an SDE, when they come back to earth, this earth feels so meaningless
Yep.
that when you first have that glass of wine or that drug or whatever it is, you have a moment of lifting back up out of the physical world. And so it kind of reminds you for a moment of heaven. And you long for that experience. And as we know now, that never works out in the long run for people. But I
Yeah.
do believe it's a spiritual seeking. The act of drinking or using is a spiritual seeking, kind of headed in the wrong direction, you know?
And there are some of the most highly evolved souls that are coming here for the addiction journey.
Exactly
And some
right.
of our greatest teachers that we
Yes.
ever had, ever will have, some of them of the top holy men and women who have walked the earth and are walking the earth now
Right.
have been or are in the addiction path.
I
And
agree.
for me, it was primarily not just, oh, heaven rejected me. That started it. It was I couldn't shut off the connection with the spirit world.
Mm.
All those classes I went to learn how to get better at it, get deeper symbols and all of that, tune in the right way and quickly. I had to go back to those teachers and go, help me. I can't shut this stuff off. It is ruining my life. I have to drink to tune out. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Sue's going to say even that served a purpose because
That's right. Oh, Suzanne, I love this. And because you're a Virgo, you're hard on yourself. And I get to say, I'm a Virgo too. And we turn that critical lens on ourselves more than we turn it on anyone else.
yeah,
And my good friends always help me self-correct. You know, they'll say, "Hey, wait a minute. You're doing your best. You know, you've got to turn that Virgo critical lens towards heaven because nobody here on earth is perfect. There's not a single human who has walked the earth journey perfectly, even the Dalai Lama. You know, we're all wearing the human bodysuit, all falling off of our path and figuring out how to get back on it and just messing it up as we go. And that's how we evolve. So you and I, as Virgos, we need to go, well done, us. We did it. Even if it was messy, even if we were lost at times, and we all have been. That is why now you can help so many people,
I
Suzanne.
battle that even. You'll do something as a volunteer, and 800 people took part. And I ride the high for 2 hours, and then I plummet and go, I didn't say enough. I didn't say the
Oh
right
my
thing. I
gosh,
didn't
you
do
and
enough.
me, we need some kind of mind changing therapy.
I get it. I get it. I totally get it. I'm better with it now than I was 15 years ago,
Right,
even 10 years ago, 5 years
right.
ago. But I think that is ego speaking up and saying,
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
it's not that. We
It
can
is
only
ego,
present.
and that's what's so confusing is that we think our ego boosts our confidence. It doesn't. Our ego is the lens that goes, "Hey, you're just a human. You're flawed like everybody else." And the soul is going, "How magnificent your journey is. You're learning exactly what you came to learn. You have courageous heart. You have learned to love. You are helping other people wake up." That is magnificent. And just like you, Suzanne, that Virgo mind, I mean, I'll give what I know was the best talk I've ever given. And an hour later, all I can think about is the things I didn't do right or didn't say or forgot. And I think our souls are trying to learn the beauty of imperfection, a very hard lesson, a very, very hard lesson. And I don't think I've mastered that one yet, or I think I'd be out of here.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. It's more of a tempering
Yes.
ourselves, and we try to, like, for example, when you're doing a session for somebody, you start out with managing their expectations so they know what this is and what this isn't. But we have to do it for ourselves too as practitioners.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right, my sweetheart, I wanted to ask you a couple of other things. Um, in today's world, there is so much conflict and so much trouble, and every spiritual teacher kind of defines it in a different way. What would you say humanity, the collective, is trying to learn at this time?
I would say that what humanity is trying to learn at this time is to identify when is contrast abuse. And when it is abuse, you can't simply step back, ignore it, and rise above it. It's incumbent upon us to call it out and do what we can to mitigate abuse. And I know that what one person considers justice, another one can consider abuse. So it's all going to be dependent upon your frame of reference, and that will come from your soul. So the best thing to do is to know thyself. Know who you are as a soul. It comes through prayer, it comes through meditation, it comes through putting yourself in another person's shoes and realizing that there are people, I call them the 1% of the 1%, which I know is a silly name, but it's a way to say we don't really know the names of those who are attempting to control humanity and attempting to control society. They're not red or blue, they're not big R or big D. They're unknown to us. They pull the strings from behind the scenes, but humanity has had a lifelong quest of those who have the most power wanting all of it,
Yeah.
wanting to transfer all the power to them, all the wealth to them, and then the rest of us get played into dividing against each other. So we're learning to not be divided. We're learning to be united, and that is the bottom line.
Yeah, and that's our collective power. And you can look at the world in an eight path awakening of saying, to own our real power here, we have to come together. And what a hard lesson for humanity, right? Because all we want to do is get in our head and argue our ideas and be right.
Right. Yeah.
And yet, right now, there is no right. There is only coming together and trying to help each other find compassion. All those things Jesus actually did talk about and say on the Sermon of the Mount. I give you a new commandment. It is to love one another. Those are the things I think we are trying to remember and come together for, because you're right. It's a time where those who have owned the power, the status is all shifting and changing. And you and I know it has to be spiritual power. It has to be the power of compassion and wisdom that has to win in the long run.
Money matters not, things matter not. When we go back to our home where we truly live and belong, we'll be celebrated for our acts of compassion and kindness. And that begins with looking at ourselves, doing a self inventory. Are my thoughts, words, and actions coming from love with the capital L? And for years, I've been signing off events that I have in classes with sending you love with a capital L. That's not like how I love pizza, but big love from my heart space to yours.
Oh,
And to me, we get confused in thinking that love means a feeling. I have to make myself feel love for you. Well, I can feel love for Sue, but I maybe can't feel love for somebody I've never met. I think of love as behaviors. When we talk about loving your neighbor as yourself, we're talking about behaviors of respect and compassion.
yeah,
And it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to live it. And we're all getting the chance to decide whether or not we're going to live it.
yeah. A big choice point for humanity, right? Well, I applaud you with all of your beautiful work in the world, your incredible eight-path journey that I'm in awe of. And what would you like to say as a final thing for the listeners? And also, how do they reach you? And do you still have a very, very long wait list?
I'll tell you what, you can go to carefreemedium.com. And I will say this, that the wait list for a one-to-one session to connect with a loved one in spirit is about 2 years. If you want sooner, what I have sooner is a small group reading limited to 6, and everyone is included with receiving messages in that group, and I can reach a few more people that way. I also still have a one-to-one session called Ask the Spirit Guides, which is more intuitive, and you can learn about your guides and ask them life issue questions so they can give you more data, more information to make your own decisions. There are years where I can't do any one-to-ones. Too many projects and things are going on. So if you're ever thinking you want to do that, I would definitely do that now. But my wait list for one-to-ones for departed loved ones is closed. There's no reason to keep taking names and have people wondering where they are on that one. The main thing I want to do though, and where I put a lot of energy, is teaching people how to do this for themselves.
Yeah,
That's
beautiful.
that's primary. That's first and foremost. Yeah, I have to pay the bills, so I still do some of the one-to-ones, but the classes are the thing because it goes back to if you give someone a fish, they die
Right.
for a day. If you teach them to fish, they nourish for a lifetime. And I do know from experience that everyone can learn to make his or her own direct contact
Yeah.
with guides, angels, loved ones in the light. And we want empowerment. And what I want to say to everybody, since you've opened that space, is that I firmly believe that we all chose to be here
Yeah,
on Earth at this time.
I
You
agree.
know, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in a war zone somewhere or close to it, that you chose to be here, and that means you brought something special here. You
Or
brought,
that's needed at this
right?
time.
That's needed
Yes.
here, and that has a ripple effect, so that you may see it as a small act or a small impact of your state of being.
Mhm.
No, no, no. You're having a ripple effect here. It's an exciting time to be here. Yes, there's going to be times where we're worried or sick at heart. I know the other day I just got a stomach ache seeing some of the things that were happening. And I realized I'm going to honor that feeling, but I'm not going to stay there. And I'm going to look at what it's telling me. And it was telling me, call upon warrior angels of light to go to that situation and illuminate the situation for all to see more clearly. And then
Now
I
you're speaking
give
to
it,
my heart, girl.
right? Just give it. Get out of ego. What do I do to fix this? Yeah, you can write letters and do things, but we have to give these things to the gifts that God gave us.
Yeah. Thank you. This has been one of my absolute favorite mystical conversations, and I really hope that our paths cross again soon, Suzanne. And To everyone listening, you have been blessed by getting to know Suzanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium. You can Google her and go to her website. And I am Sue Frederick, and we are saying until we meet again, many, many blessings, everybody.